Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. I thought I'd share with you a bit of a short memory on one of the comedians that I really admired the most and was lucky enough to meet, and that's the one and only, the very brilliant Benny Hill. Now, Benny today is derided as being totally un-PC and not popular and almost forgotten by a mass culture, if you like. But I thought he was a genius. He was Britain's really Charlie Chaplin, and that's how he described himself. He very much admired the works of Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, Harold Lloyd, all of those greats of the silent and early talking era. Now, I met Benny in rather strange circumstances because I was working in a hotel as a cabaret artist, and this was just around the time when things were starting to go slightly wrong for Benny. Now, the hotel was called, I believe, the Onslow Court in South Kensington. Now, what I didn't know about the Onslow Court, which I found out later, was that it was the infamous place where the acid bath murder guy used to stay and recruit people, rich people, and then drive them off for a bath. It's funny what you find out years later after spending quite a few nights in a very eerie corridor on there. Anyway, back to Benny. Now, I'd been appearing, as I say, there, and I didn't realise he'd been in the audience and stuff like that. He lived round the corner in a flat, and what was interesting was I went to the flat, and I think it was on 2 or 3 levels, but he really only used, I think, 1 level. He just had lots of televisions, that's what I remember. Very sparse sort of place to live in. He said his main home was in Southampton, but what I found out about Benny, you know, becoming I wouldn't say friends as such, but, you know, just connections, you know. I think he liked to speak to someone who was young at the time, and he was trying to find out what young people liked comedy wise. He asked me a lot about things like the Young Ones and Rick Mail and things, you know, that was sort of taking off in that period. And what I noticed was he was very observant. You know, if we were having sort of a cup of tea or coffee or something in the lounge, he would be watching people all the time and pricking his ears up, you know, listening for that conversation, or he would sort of point out somebody who was slightly eccentric. And you did kind of wonder if that person then would become a character within the Benny Hill show. As I say, a very warm, kind man, very sweet, incredibly shy. When people came up to him, if he recognised him and sort of, you know, said, "Oh, I really enjoy your show" and stuff, he was slightly embarrassed about it all, which is quite sad, really, you know, because he was such a comic phenomenon, you know. I know a lot of people sort of attack him now for things like Hill's Angels and slapping the guy in the bald head and stuff like that. And also, another connection to Benny. I was in a shop in Leicester Square a few years after that, and I bumped into Henry McGee. Now, I don't know if anybody knows or remembers this shop, but it was called Drummond's. And Drummond's sort of sold all of this sort of theatrical paraphernalia, quite pricey, I might add, but it was one of those places that you could just go and lose yourself in and look at all these old great posters. And he did get quite a lot out and show you things if you asked him. And there were reproduction cards in the doorway for about 40 or 50 pence, and you know, it's interesting finding names and stuff like that on there and thinking, wow, did they play there, all that sort of stuff. But Mr. Drummond himself was a nice man, a little bit, you know, a little bit sort of crouchy in many respects, but that's where, as I say, I met Henry McGee, and he was just looking in, you know, boxes and things like that, like we all did, and we just got chatting. We went to the cafe next door, and he gave me sort of a masterclass on how the shows were put together and the people that he worked with. And he said that Benny took comedy very seriously. You know, there wasn't that much joking around on set because time was money. Those shows were expensive, and I don't think anybody at Thames TV knew just what value they had in Benny Hill. Only now do they realise, of course, years later, just how phenomenally successful he's been as an export. Now, I know Benny got to see a little bit of that, but he was very much a UK man, if you like, a British man. And he only really wanted to be big and do successful things at home. So I think he enjoyed the American experience and the exposure that it gave him. But ultimately, I think his real goal was just to be mega successful here in England. And for that, of course, we should all raise a glass, because he really was a wonderful man who gave a lot of joy to so many people. Now, if I could only find somebody with a bald head to slap. Thank you so much for watching.